Welcome back to my garden. When we last spoke, I was heading off, quite excited, to the 40th reunion dinner of my old school, high school. Well, of course, I wasn't headed there. It took place in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. It was a Zoom call, and three or four of us availed ourselves of the opportunity. A lot of people made the dinner from all sorts of corners of the world. And it was a fantastic turnout, actually, of 100 or so boys, I suppose 110 boys, maybe 70 people at the dinner, plus the four of us. So very good turnout, and it was a wonderful time. Everyone was full of good cheer, and well, I wasn't, but all of those at the dinner were also full of good wine and beer and perhaps food as well. But it was great, you know, these nostalgic, memory-filled, the stories and the camaraderie. It is wonderful. And of course, everyone was commenting on, guess how lucky we were to have gone to a school such as the one we went to. And that is, of course, true. We were immensely fortunate. And in the areas where perhaps it could have been, should have been, much better, people gloss over those details. We're very forgiving over time, and that's, I suspect, something that is hardwired into our genes, and it gives us a big survival instinct. Dwelling on the past and our misfortunes really doesn't do us any favours, I don't believe. Reflecting, sure, but dwelling, yeah, not so much. And one of my friends that had joined us from China in the Zoom call, he was saying he's been very successful in the educational world, director of an international school, has been at various schools, and we were talking about all sorts of things, and he was saying how well everybody seemed to get on together, and I think he said something along the lines of how he didn't really recall there being terribly much in the way of bullying. Of course, the sort of initiations, we had a school hostel, and okay, fair enough, that happened. But actually, I don't think that was entirely true. I think that's, some might remember things differently if they choose to remember them at all. And indeed, in South Africa in the 80s was I don't want to say exactly violent, very aggressive culture. So of course that was reflected in the school. But on the whole, I think we did get on very well, and the fact that so many people made such an effort to meet up for the reunion, well, that speaks volumes. And as does, one might suspect, the evident success of so many of my peers. People have gone on to lead incredibly productive and well, accolade-filled, accomplishments abound sort of lives, and not on a small local scale, you know, big fish in a little pond, but on a national, even international level. And one thing that no one really mentioned was the fact that we were certainly, in my lifetime's memory of the school, we were beyond any shadow of a doubt, academically, the worst year in the history of the school. No question about it. And, of course, I didn't say this, and some of them might be watching, and if they are, please understand that what I'm about to say is said not just charitably or in good spirit, but passing no judgments. But certainly at the time, I thought that our poor academic accomplishments were not just a result of some abysmal teaching, and there was that there at the school, although I had my good teachers too, so they weren't all bad, but there were some terrible teachers, and the level, and my friend and I were talking about this with the sort of what we know now, reflection based on years of pedagogical development. Well, schools have moved on. What was acceptable then at a very good school in South Africa wouldn't barely be tolerated, would be sackable offences in the sort of schools where we ended up working later on in our lives. And yet, so many of my peers went on to do very well. First of all, graduating with degrees and achieving professional letters behind their name, and then going on to live these very successful lives. And I suppose many amongst the group, those certainly who hadn't embraced education or further education as fully as perhaps a few of us did, they would say, well, that just goes to show how education isn't all it's cracked up to be. And there is that sort of thing. You know, a friend of mine from my Peru days recently posted something saying, along the lines of, you know, I've met a lot of idiots with master's degrees. And people like saying that sort of thing. It makes them feel better. Probably because they don't have master's degrees. And in a broader and more nuanced sort of way, people have started to talk about other sorts of intelligence. You know, there's not just this academic intelligence. And probably that's what my peers were demonstrating, that they had a different sort of intelligence that was better tuned with success in the real world. And I hear what people are saying. You know, Daniel Goleman, the highly respected positive psychologist, and I suppose the father of the phrase emotional intelligence, EQ, not IQ. I think there's a bit of it, though. It would be a bit like saying there's lots of different kinds of strength. You know, you said he's a very strong person. Well, everyone immediately knows what you're talking about. They are physically strong. That's what we mean. You wouldn't say, what, do you mean he has great strength of character? He is able to resist large amounts of pain. He has the courage of his convictions. You know, whatever ways strength might equally be demonstrated. When we say someone is strong, we kind of mean, I think, in general, without qualifying it, physical strength. And intelligence, I think, on the whole, what we mean, literally, is intellectual reasoning capacity. And other sorts of strength, we mean it in a sort of metaphorical measure of a different quality. And we might just as well call intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, emotional maturity. It would mean, I think, maybe, I'm not saying it does, but it could, if we'd chosen to call it that, have meant the same thing. I suppose also there is a point that when we talk about intelligence, we're hinting perhaps at the point that intelligence is an entrance rather than a success criteria. It allows you access to certain things, but having more of it won't make you necessarily better at those things beyond a certain point. Defamed perhaps not true, but much quoted statistic that the average IQ of Nobel laureates is 130-ish. So you don't have to be a super genius to be a Nobel laureate. You do really, or is greater than 130. I don't think it's an average. So you need a certain level of intelligence, but beyond that, it's not necessarily a very good predictor of your success. But all the same, putting all that to one side, there's no doubt that I was very blessed to have gone to that school rather than a number of other schools. But what did that blessing consist of? Why was it bestowed upon me? Well, it's because I came from a white middle-class family in South Africa at a particular point in its history. And in particular, I was a white male from a middle-class family background. And that improved my odds of a particular direction, educational possibilities being thrown at me considerably. So I guess, really, we certainly should count our blessings, but perhaps on reflection we should also consider that it points to a fact that I certainly have mentioned on this channel, and many people allude to, that it's often highly underrated the degree to which success is dependent on luck. You know, being born in the right family, the right place at the right time gives you all sorts of advantages. And before anyone starts getting overly defensive and thinking I'm suggesting some sort of woke guilt trip, no, I'm just saying we should be aware of that and ask ourselves probably a more pertinent question, which is, what have we done with that good fortune? And it is interesting that in a gathering such as this one, and certainly the small sample of old grey foundation lectures that I've listened to, what people did with their good fortune is do well financially, move ahead in the business world, or gain professional qualifications that enabled them to have materially blessed lives, and then provide the same for their children. None of those things are intrinsically bad, but we should reflect upon that a little bit and ask ourselves to what degree we have made the most of our blessings. Perhaps also ask a much deeper question. To what degree the direction our lives took actually reflected our most profound expression of our inner self, the most cohesive outpouring of who we really are. And I'm not so sure about that question. I suspect a lot of my peers would have say, but we did, we are very happy. And to what end that's true? Well, I suspect they are, but to what end that is also happy as not a synonym exactly, but masked to some degree by the numbness that extreme comfort and good fortune gives us to maybe deeper, more uncomfortable questions. Well, I'm not so sure about that. I decided, I'd just steam in with this video. I'm going to have to review things carefully and think where it's going to take me in the next one. But probably that's plenty of food for thought for now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If by some small miracle you are of the class of 1984, feel free to share this with our classmates. Let me know what you think. That would be interesting. But anyway, until next week, from sunny Brazil, and of course, hoping that your lives are filled with joy. Ciao.